Good evening and welcome to Story Hour. I'm Laura Blackwell. My co-host, Daniel Marcus, started Story Hour at the beginning of a shelter-in-place order to help people remain connected in one of the oldest ways known to our species, telling each other tales around the campfire. And so here we are, nearly a year later, still sheltering in stories together. Welcome back to those returning and welcome to those of you joining us for the first time. As always, we have two writers reading for their favorite nonprofits. Tonight's readers are Alexander Danner and Craig Laurance Gidney. If you are fortunate enough to help others during this time, please consider a donation to tonight's featured nonprofits, the Massachusetts Bail Fund and SMYAL. Alexander Danner is reading for the Massachusetts Bail Fund. Massachusetts jails, did you have to live in a state that's so hard for me to say?
I'm so sorry.
Are filled with people awaiting trial simply because they cannot afford bail. Bail leads to longer incarceration times, lost jobs, lost housing, and devastated families. The Massachusetts Bail Fund provides up to $5,000 bail for low-income individuals so they can stay free while they work toward resolving their case, allowing individuals, families, and communities to stay productive, together, and stable. You can learn more at massbailfund.org. Craig Laurance Gidney is reading for SMYAL, which stands for Supporting and Mentoring Youth Advocates and Leaders. SMYAL supports and empowers lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and questioning youth in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. Through youth leadership, SMYAL creates opportunities for LGBTQ youth to build self-confidence, develop critical life skills, and engage their peers and community through service and advocacy. Committed to social change, SMYAL builds, sustains, and advocates for programs, policies, and services that youth need as they grow into adulthood. You can learn more at smyal.org. If you are here on Zoom, please feel free to leave your camera on. It can be really nice for readers to actually see an audience, something they don't get enough of these days. But everyone should have come in mute, and please do stay muted. If you are on Facebook, thank you, but please understand that we are not monitoring the chat there quite so much as we are here in Zoom, where you're welcome to join in if you're here with us. It can get quite lively. Our first reader tonight is Alexander Danner. Alexander Danner is co-creator of the serial audio drama podcast Greater Boston, greaterbostonshow.com, sound designer for the audio drama What's the Frequency, WTFrequency.com, and a member of the sound design team on the audio drama Unwell, a Midwestern Gothic mystery. His fiction has appeared most recently in the Cantabrigian, Rivet, the Journal of Writing That Risks, and the Saturday Evening Post, as well as the anthologies Machine of Death and The Girl at the End of the World. He is co-author of 2 textbooks about the craft and history of comics and graphic novels. He teaches at Emerson College. Alexander, welcome.
Thank you. It is lovely to be here. I have not done a reading of fiction in a number of years, so this is very exciting.
It's exciting for us too.
Oh, I see one of my friends just showed up. I'm just going to let her in.
So I understand you brought a few stories for us tonight.
I did. I'm reading 3 very short stories. They're all kind of odd. I tend to write with a touch of surrealism in my work, and hopefully some humor. And I'm going to start with the shortest and weirdest of them. So this story is called Serving Suggestions. They ate the... I'm going to mess up right in the first sentence. All right, let's start over. They ate the youngest child not long after his 9th birthday. The boy didn't mind. He was a wheel of cheese after all, and had achieved his peak flavor. He wanted to be eaten. It's what he was for. Better certainly than going to mold. His sister was a wine bottle, 3 years his elder, the sturdy middle child who held the family together throughout all their tribulations. She was born with a tapered neck and a flat bottom and striking cobalt glass. Tragically, her color didn't last. By her 12th year, she had faded to a common green, pale and yellowed like the autumn grass. But she didn't mind. Not really. That was the year of the baby's eating. He had come into the world soft, held together only by the wax he was born with. Now he was firm and ripe. With a sharp knife, the proud parents peeled back his waxy skin to reveal the milky flesh beneath, one small section at a time. The sister stood support for them all, never worried for herself. Born without a cork, she held nothing back from those who needed her, always ready to fill an empty cup. When the family swallowed the final bites of their beloved cheese, the wine bottle offered the toast in his honor, weeping out a sweet and grassy mead to best complement the salty sharpness of her brother's farewell. The eldest child was the disappointment of the family. He was born a man with nothing of himself to give. His parents loved him as best they could, saw what value they could in him as the only means to perpetuating the family. The cheese wheel was gone, after all, and a bottle begets no bottles. But the man resolved to disappoint his parents still further. He had no intention to marry, no desire for heirs. He leaned on his sister more than anyone, so that the parents worried for them both. In time, he became a baker, and his parents were satisfied. They saw how hard he worked to complement his siblings, to offer the world something as worthy as they. Only the sister saw the reproach in his work. They had served the youngest on cheap crackers, while now he turned out the perfect baguette, the proper pairing to wine and cheese. Too late, too late, too late. And that is that one.
That was very weird.
Thank you, Julian. My son is listening. Okay, so my second story is titled After the Wedding. After the wedding, Pygmalion never sculpted again. What point would there have been? He had already created his masterpiece, his ivory love, that enchanting homunculus who shared his bed. His hands were hers now, his caresses, his passion, all hers. To continue his craft would have been ungrateful, or worse, unfaithful. And so he packed away his chisels and hammers and files into a wooden crate that he didn't even bother to lock, the lid still half open, casually abandoned to the corner of his workshop. He covered the windows, closed the door. He went home with his wife, and he stayed there. As for Galatea, what could she know of Pygmalion's sacrifice when she herself had been the capstone to his career? She loved him, of course. Her love for him was carved into her beating heart with the same precision as the slenderness of her fingers, the slope of her thighs, the symmetry of her nose. But it is no easy thing to be wed to one's own creator. Born and betrothed in an afternoon, Galatea spent the early months of her marriage in a fog of bewilderment. What must she expect of love? What offering was hers to make? When their first child was born, Pygmalion was amazed that perfection could be his a second time, that perfection could be born of a carnal act without measurement or exactitude, or long years of lesser malformed offspring. As he held his child, he measured her with his hands and chided himself for it, then measured her again. Galatea, though, was troubled by the birth, certain that her own creation had been nothing of the sort. She was never so small, so pink. She remembered no warm, dark womb, no contortion toward freedom, no first shock of air. She remembered only his lips upon hers, and then the paralyzing compulsion to be his always. It was only natural that she would one day heft a hammer, determined to understand how a lover is born. She slipped away as she could while he napped in the garden or took wine with other men. The workshop awaited her. Pygmalion had never taken her there, but he had made no secret of its location, its significance. The door fell open at her touch. The wooden crate, its lips still parted in anticipation, beckoned her to take up her husband's disused tools and opened wide its maw. She worked as she imagined Pygmalion had worked, in a single-minded rage of creation, striving toward that improbable balance of desire and vanity that allows one to fall madly in love with a beauty of one's own deliberate devising. And what beauty did she devise? Only Pygmalion himself, over and over and over. She sculpted him not as he was, but as she had been shaped to see him, larger than himself, younger, more beautiful than even he thought he could be. And each time she felt herself crushed by her own delight in seeing his face emerge once more. It wasn't until years later that Pygmalion stumbled into the workshop, wine-drunk friends in tow, boasting of his storied prowess, his goddess-given gift. And there he caught Galatea, belly large with a second child and chisel in hand, polishing the contours of a face utterly unrecognizable to the man who wore it. He was sickened by her secret art, by the figure's remarkable physique, by the rough stone with which she chose to work. He denounced the violence of its posture, the brutishness of its hands, the engorgement of its sex. As both husband and artist, he railed against her. She listened to his fierce pronouncements for as long as he made them. When he proclaimed that the fruits of her artistry contained no beauty, reflected no beauty, she applied her full strength to believing him. Her strength was not enough. She knew, however many times she placed chisel to stone, only one face would ever be found within. So when finally Pygmalion had exhausted his arsenal of judgment, she cursed him once for a critic, then dashed the half-formed sculpture on the floor, resolving never to create another, and never to wander beyond the confines of her husband's arms again. She offered no apology, but Pygmalion was appeased by the destruction. Still, he burned with an unendurable question. Whose hands had shaped the child that filled her womb? Pygmalion's love for his wife faltered. Her skin became mottled, numb white patches appearing along her arms and torso. a familiar sensation as soothing as the long, still meditations she took in the garden, alone and silent. He also sat silently, watching her from doorways and windows, unable to abandon the sight of her, yet unwilling to approach, mesmerized and repulsed in equal measure. She still loved him, could not rid herself of her love for him, etched as it was into the grain of her being. But she found solace in the loosening grip of his love for her. By the time the child was born, she had little warmth left to her, and she barely cried as the large stone was wrenched from her loins. Pygmalion threw the ugly rock to the floor in disgust, but on striking the ground, it cracked open, revealing a live boy nestled inside. The boy's pink skin was no proof in Pygmalion's eyes. He heard the harsh sounding of a chisel in the child's every cry, and he could not love what was not his. Pygmalion awoke the next morning to find Galatea rigid in the bed beside him, the mewling child suckling vainly at her ivory breast. She had become unmade. He said nothing to the children of this tragedy, told them nothing of how they had become motherless, of how he had forfeited a woman for want of a masterpiece. For the rest of his days, Pygmalion moved her dutifully from bed to kitchen to hearth as the hour of the day demanded, in perfect imitation of life, preserving the shadow that remained of his greatest achievement, his final creation, his only love. Okay, I have one more. I am ending on a lighter note. Okay. The woman who could smell the future understood that she was a joke, a mishap of science with slightly less merit than silly putty. If she were in a comic book, she'd be a fourth-rate guest star for a third-rate hero, the sort of heroine who gets killed off in some crass multi-part crossover in order to generate a little bit of cheap shock and posthumous buzz. But she wasn't a comic book heroine, not even a fourth-rate one. She was just a girl with a name, Jordan, and a job, copywriter, and a boyfriend, Mark. And also a very small temporal distortion permanently lodged in her left nostril. It wasn't especially useful. She certainly hadn't figured out a way to make money from it. You can't smell lottery numbers or prime stocks. Her power didn't give her any athletic or artistic talent. And you cannot literally sniff out crime, no matter what the popular metaphors tell you. In fact, here is a comprehensive list of the uses Jordan had found for her talent. Number 1, she always had an umbrella in anticipation of rain. 2, she was never surprised by surprise parties. She could smell the birthday candles. 3, she deftly avoided other people's flatulence. Not much satisfaction there, as she'd have already encountered the odor hours earlier. And 4, she knew when buildings would catch fire. Okay, the last one seems pretty useful. And it was. Over the course of her life, she had doused dozens of fires before they could threaten lives or property. She had even considered becoming a professional firefighter. But fire departments don't want people who can predict fires. People who predict fires usually set them in the first place. After the third time she was investigated for arson, Jordan pretty much gave up trying to warn anyone about fires at all. Instead, she just bought herself a good fire extinguisher, showed up where she was needed, and slipped away before anyone could ask her any questions. This had required her to learn a bit of lockpicking as well, but fortunately Jordan was good with her hands. She played a little piano too. So those are the pertinent details that led up to Jordan's present situation. Hiding in an empty room across from the office of a magazine editor, long after business hours, hoping to prevent a murder. Okay, yes, she had actually sniffed out crime. For once. She could not stop rolling her eyes at that realization. The editor's name was Elliot Clark, and Jordan had been in his office 12 hours earlier interviewing for a freelance gig with the publishing house's new magazine about container gardening. It was dull work, but Jordan had an opening in her schedule and was really hoping to put aside some money for a trip to Wisconsin. She'd always enjoyed both cold weather and cheese, so Wisconsin seemed like something of a Shangri-La to her. The interview was proceeding well. Jordan was personable and well qualified, so she had a better than fair chance at the job. Halfway through the interview, though, Jordan became distracted by an unmistakable odor. The acrid tang of gunpowder hung about the room. Roughly 12 hours hence. She recognized the odor immediately. She'd been shot once herself when she broke into a paper warehouse to put out a fire started by a faulty coffee pot. The night watchman naturally felt awful once he understood that the intruder he'd shot had actually saved the warehouse. But then he was fired and he didn't worry so much about Jordan after that. Jordan was fortunate. The shot had only grazed her arm, and the paper company had been only too happy to cover her medical expenses in light of the major catastrophe she had averted. Still, it had been among the most frightening experiences of her life, and the associated scent had stayed with her ever since. So now here she was, hiding in a conference room, spying on her potential future employer, whom she still hoped was going to hire her to write 3,000 words about stupid little potted herbs. For the moment, Clark was alone, which suggested the possibility of suicide rather than murder. But Clark didn't look like he was planning to kill himself. He was working at his computer, plugged into an iPod, bobbing his head to whatever tune he was listening to. He was obviously under deadline pressure, or he wouldn't be at the office so late at night, but he didn't seem much to mind being there either. Sure enough, after several moments, another figure appeared. A woman in her mid-30s wearing a decidedly peeved expression and carrying, surprise, a modest handgun. Okay, at least now Jordan knew who was planning to shoot whom. That question had given her some worry. It would be humiliating to come to the aid of the wrong person, only to make the killer's work that much easier. So, with all pressing mysteries resolved, it was officially time for the ridiculous part. Jordan sighed and hefted her fire extinguisher. She had no real weapons. She decided to just stick with the equipment she already knew and quietly waited for the woman to turn her back. Didn't take long. The woman was quite direct about her task, heading straight to Clark's door and raising the gun. A short blast from the fire extinguisher was enough to distract her, and as she began to turn, Jordan brought the extinguisher down on her head, hard enough to knock her out, though, she hoped, not hard enough to cause any permanent damage. The gun discharged once, as she had known it would have to, but the bullet passed harmlessly through a wall into the empty office next door, where it lodged in the side of another editor's desk. Jordan kicked the gun away from the woman, across the hall and into the conference room she'd been hiding in. Clark, finally on his feet at this point, was looking back and forth between Jordan and the shooter with some understandable distress. "Do I know you?" he asked. No, said Jordan, before making her exit. Back home, she deposited her shoes, her coat, and her fire extinguisher in the coat closet, as she did every evening. It was late, and Mark had already eaten. Now he was relaxing with a glass of beer, something dark and malty that he had brewed himself. The basement was perpetually cluttered with bottles and vats of his ongoing projects. If only she had such a practical skill. How was the interview? He asked, putting the beer down on the coffee table. Jordan sighed as she dropped to the couch beside him. It went fine at first, but the guy seemed pretty distracted by the end. Honestly, I'm not sure he'll even be that focused on filling the position. I'm sorry, Mark said, winding his arms around her from the side as he placed his chin on her shoulder. It didn't sound like an assignment you'd have enjoyed anyway. You can do better. Maybe, she said. I'd like to. She sniffed, not really meaning to spy on the future, but there it was anyway. Blueberries. Blueberry pancakes. Several hours off. Breakfast. And a few days after that, dirt? Dirt and basil. Oregano. I don't know, she said. Maybe it went better than I thought. After a moment, she stood and stretched. Anyway, I think I'll turn in early, she said, leaving Mark to his beer. She wasn't long in falling asleep, and in her sleep she dreamed that she could do better, that she was better. In her dream, she could outrun bullets or snatch them from the air. In her dream, Wisconsin was within her grasp anytime she wanted it. In her dream, she could fly. That is all. Thank you.
Thank you. Those were all so different and all so quirky and delightful in their own way.
Thank you.
In between the writers, we always find ourselves needing a breath just to let things sink in and ready for something new. That was really fun. Thank you. And next we have Craig Laurance Gidney. Craig Laurance Gidney writes both contemporary and genre fiction. He is the author of the collections See, Swallow Me and Other Stories, Latha Press, 2008, Skin Deep Magic, Rebel Satori Press, 2014, young adult novel Bereft, Tiny Satchel Press, 2013, and A Spectral Hue, Word Horde, 2019. You can see the cover for A Spectral Hue behind him. I really recommend looking it up. He is also a lifelong Washington, D.C. resident. Craig, welcome.
Thank you for having me on again.
It is our pleasure.
I'm going to read from a story that was in my first collection, See, Swallow Me. It's called Come Join We, and it's probably not going to be the whole story. It's going to be just a section of it.
Well, then let's dive in and see how far we can get.
Yes. Come join we. After my fever broke, I found that I could see things in a different way. People, animals, and even some objects acquired a strange luminosity, as if seen through a prism. My grandmother's head, for instance, was swathed in a shimmering halo of pearly mist. At first, I thought that this was only a trick of sight. I'd been sick for over 2 weeks. By then, I was used to seeing things through a haze. Not only that, but my grandmother's hair was pearl gray. Maybe my eyesight had been damaged from the illness. I could accept this, but at times her head seemed to float on a cloud of mist over her body. I would stare at what resembled flower petals in the mist, which always subsided, shrinking into an aura of dull silver around her head. Granny's face would wrinkle with concern, like an old leather purse. I'd say nothing, keeping my miraculous vision to myself. My mother's halo, on the other hand, would fluctuate between falling snow and silver glitter. It changed according to her mood, like the holographic postcards of the Virgin the sisters sold at the Divine Annunciation gift shop where she worked. Mary, sorrowful, hands folded, eyes downcast, turned another way, and you could see Mary smiling, her eyes looking towards heaven. I could not ignore a stranger, but I could not ignore a stranger, a woman, on our front doorway. So I told Granny. She adjusted her spectacles. She had been working on her needlepoint. In turning her head, the shawl draped over her shoulders slipped. She peered at the doorway. She squinted. There's nothing there, she said. The mist around her French braids subsided. Yes, there is, I said. I was shivering. I was still weak. She walked over to me and sat down beside me on the couch. She pulled my head to her bosom and enveloped me in cinnamon, rose toilet water, and sweat. She's still there? She asked after a while. I peeked through the mesh of her shawl. Yes. Granny looked through the mesh of the screen door. She said in a theatrical tone of voice, "Go away, woman, and leave my grandson alone." Granny, I said, I'm sorry. I just thought that I'm sorry. What does she look like, this woman? I lowered the shawl. I felt safe in the circle of her arms, yet I hesitated before describing her. She's almost as tall as Mom and a little darker than her too. She's wearing a white dress with blue flowers printed on it. Her hair is braided and the braids are covered in glass beads. She looks so sad. She's crying. The woman had begun floating on a blue-green mist, but I didn't tell Granny this. Granny stopped holding me. Her eyes were unfocused, slightly glazed over. I snuggled against her for warmth, more out of habit than out of real fear. I knew that the woman in the doorway couldn't come inside, and if she could, she couldn't hurt me. Granny looked at the screen door with a suspicious eye. White dress with blue flowers, eh? I nodded, burrowing into her bosom. Does she have a thin face, this woman you see? I stole a glance. Yes, and there's a little spot of white just above her right eye. Does she look like your mother? I nodded again. Granny leaned back against the headboard. She gently pulled me against her. It's your Aunt Ondine, who died before you were born. My Aunt Ondine? I asked. I'd never heard of her before. Yes, she died 15 years ago. She drowned. I pulled myself out of Granny's grasp to study the woman. She wasn't looking at me or at anything at all, really. She seemed locked in her private world. If I stared at her too hard, she wavered. Ondine was pretty, with dark brown skin bathed in dew. Her eyes were dark and deep, gateways to something secret. Her tears had glints of iridescence in them. If anything, death made her beautiful, not like those cinema films where ghosts were evil things with worms in their eyes, reeking of the grave. I caught her scent. She smelled slightly of oranges. How did she die? I don't know if I should tell you, Granny said, standing up. Your mother wouldn't like it. I must have looked sad or scared, probably both. Granny relented. As she started on her tale, I kept a close eye on Undine. Undine was my first girl child. She came on the heels of your Uncle Zeke. It was a difficult birth, 3 days of sweating and pain. And what did I get for all that work? A fragile thing, not much larger than your granddad's hand. She came feet first. I should have known then. She didn't seem to like life much, like she knew that her time here was limited. She was a sweet, dreaming girl child. Her thoughts turned towards other things. At first, I thought she was a mute because she didn't say nary a word. Maybe I was too busy raising other kids or taking care of your granddad. Undine was disappearing, her mist blending into the overall blueness of dusk. Then one day, she's 4 or so, she says to me, "Why is the sea whispering?" In just those words, and I was just beside myself. "How come you didn't go to the doctor or have her checked out?" Well, in those days, we were a lot more isolated than we are now. They hadn't even built the bridge. People who wanted to see us took the ferry. So anyway, I say to Undine, "Why, Dumplin'? That's just the sound of the tide." And she looks at me, her face as solemn as a monk's. She says, "No, I hear voices, people whispering in the sea." So I said to her, the screen door slammed open. Mom came home from her job at the vendor booth. She walks right through her now transparent sister. She walked over to me and planted a kiss on my forehead. Feeling better? Yes. Granny had gotten up and was heading towards the kitchen. Mom asked, "You feel good enough to go to school tomorrow?" "Not that good." She laughed. The tiredness vanished from her face momentarily. I could see the crying woman no more. I said to Mom, "Granny was telling me about Aunt Undine." She frowned at me, then at my grandmother. Strands of cloud snow engulfed her aura. She was angry. "What did you tell him that for?" Granny was quick and sly. The child had been rifling through some old photograph books. He came upon her picture. "What's so wrong about telling him about your sister?" Mom had no answer for that. Her snow flare darkened and swirled. "I think that child ought to know about his family's history." Granny looked away from her daughter and pretended to be annoyed. I could tell that she was lying. Her pearl light pulsed triumphantly. "Boy, what are you looking at?" My mother's voice was sharp. "Nothing," I stuttered. I wrapped myself in a blanket. Mom moved away, looking for dinner. Eventually, her snow settled down, becoming less fluttery. Only one more weird thing happened that night. When she sat down to pray, my mother's aura shimmered and snuffed out when she held her rosary. The rosary beads, heavy and lead, didn't jingle as they usually did. They hissed. After a few days, I found that I could walk without stumbling and keep solid food down. Mom sent me back to school. I walked there in the early morning, crunching through the soft gravel road. A recent storm had left the island's ground soggy and the air clear and moist. The road I took was parallel to the beach. Between the trees, I caught glimpses of the shining ocean, and off in the distance, a greenish blur that was the coast of Georgia. A few black yachts trugged and puffed in the middle of the expanse of water, the ferries to our island. I veered off the path, heading for wilder country. Soon I was nearing the top of a hill. Spring was starting. I splashed through the black puddles, thinking of the story of the tar baby. It would be horrible to be stuck like that in the ooze, but it would also be fun. I found that flowers, with my new sight, glowed even in the bright sunlight. They didn't have auras, their radiance was contained within. At the top of the hill, I came upon a small brown hare sitting up on its hind legs, its nose twitching in front of a bluebell. At once I was enveloped by an overpowering fragrance, the cloy of sweetness, the moist of earth, the clear of water, all rushed at me, making me drunk. The blue of the flower was more somehow. Violet embers, stroke of pollen. I sat down, dizzy. I found that I knew everything about the hare, its home, hidden deep within the briar patch, constantly evading foxes. I knew the story told by clay, mud, and tar. I closed my eyes, trying to distance myself from our brotherhood, the rabbit and I. When the nausea subsided, I opened my eyes cautiously. He was gone, but I wasn't alone. I saw an old woman staring at me intently. Her hair was long, pearl gray, and contained in two braids. Her skin was wrinkled and red like clay. Her eyes were warm and dark and familiar. She wore trousers and a simple blouse. I could tell by her wavering that she was dead, like Aunt Undine. I wasn't afraid of her, though. I'm not sure why. She walked over to me and sat down. Are you all right? She asked. She didn't move her lips or even smile. In spite of that, she seemed friendly. Yes, I said. She put an arm around me. I could feel it. Her touch was feathery. Who are you? I asked after a while. She just glanced at me and smiled. Ask your grandmother. Her smile dazzled me like a prize, a flash of white teeth like cowrie shells. The wrinkles around her mouth and eyes were tiny canyons pressed into the folds of her skin. She tapped me on the shoulder. Look. I turned around, following her pointing finger. There on the beach below us were hundreds of wavering people, both red and brown. They wore a mishmash of old-fashioned clothes. Black folk wore bright, if clean, rags, homespun dresses and kerchiefs for the women, gray suits for the men. Indians, they could be nothing else, wore everything from leather to linen and all points in between. They walked hand in hand, mixing with one another. A fire burned on the beach, even though this was early morning. Trays of corn, beef, chicken, greens, and other things were waited while cooking. My mouth watered. I had only eaten a thin, watery bowl of farina that morning. Two people on the beach spotted us, a tall, thin Indian woman in a flowing robe with a stylized design on it, and her boyfriend, a young black man the same color as me, in a white suit. We waved back, the old woman and I. Then I felt incredibly sad, for I learned their story. The old woman showed it to me without words. Years ago, they'd escaped from slavery. The scent of sugar, the damp of the rice fields, the sting of cotton was on their hands, shimmering in their halos. Some people in the group were clearly damaged. Welts and scars decorated their bodies. There was a man with half an ear. I saw a woman with rough and pockmarked skin. She'd been burned. I could hear them singing now, gospel voices interweaving with majestic chants, two kinds of savagery, as my mother would call it, mixing. I heard that savagery of their pride. Even in death, they wore it. The man with half an ear was transformed by it. His lost ear became a whole black shell inlaid with mother of pearl. The woman's burned face became a sculpture's head, carved of rock. People's scars became maps of pain and survival. I heard the savage pride in their music, too, in the drums from Africa, old America, weaving together until I bent over and retched. Farina burned my throat. I saw the peaceful village wiped out, men and horses carrying torches, the crack of gunfire and bone. The whole village wiped from the beaches. In an instant, I saw blackened and reddened bodies lying side by side. I saw the bodies sinking beneath the sand. I turned to the old woman sitting next to me. Why did you show me this? I croaked out. She said nothing. She smiled. It was a horrible thing, that smile. I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
So Craig, how much more is there?
I'd say maybe 15 more minutes.
We have 15 more minutes.
Okay.
Let's use them, please. Don't leave me there.
Yeah.
Okay. let
Don't
me
leave
get
us
that.
there.
Okay. I went back home in a daze. Granny greeted me, surprised. She felt my forehead and immediately sent me to bed. A few hours later, she came in bringing a bowl of soup with her. I told her about my encounter with the woman, but not about the massacre. I didn't want her to worry too much. This woman, Granny said, was she red like clay? Yes. And when she smiled, were her teeth uneven, but the whitest teeth you ever saw? Yes. She sat still, considering something or other. She was smoking her pipe. A rich, pungent smell of tobacco rose. That was my Aunt Zora, your great great aunt. She was half Algonquin and crazy as a loon. So my parents thought, but I loved her when I was a child. She would sing to me Indian songs about Indian songs. She paused, the wrinkles in her face cracking with concentration. I can't remember them. They're gone. A melody snaked its way into my head. It was one of the songs from the scene on the beach. I sang it to my grandmother. She smiled. Her whole face did. That's it, child. That's it. One of the songs. You have the gift. Like I reckon Zora and Ondine did. Zora would always be talking about voices. She'd always be was talking about hearing people singing. Granny looked off into the distance, seeing beyond my bedroom window. Or screaming. Her aura deepened in color. It took on a bluish tint. If pearls were blue, they'd be that color. What's wrong? I asked her. Ondine heard voices in the swamp that called to her. Granny got up and began to clear away the dishes. She pulled the shawl tight around her shoulders. Aren't you going to tell me what happened to her? Granny didn't look at me. You need to get your rest. Go to sleep, child, so you'll get better. She closed the door on me, leaving me with memories that weren't my own. When I got better, I went back to school. By now, I could pretty much ignore my heightened senses. It helped that I was considered to be kind of odd by my classmates anyway. So when I saw their auras were bright orange or urine yellow and giggled, they paid me no mind. Besides, in the daytime, these things weren't as clear as they could be. One day in Sister Margaret's math class, I was drifting between protractors, proofs, and equations. I found that the room was multifaceted and upside down. I felt everything, the slightest breeze, a classmate's sneeze, the vibration of Sister Margaret's chalk on the board throughout my body. The trick was to weave my fibrous filament nerve in one corner, hidden. Then I'd wait for the violet silver shimmer of dinner's wings. I folded my legs into myself. Said Sister Margaret in her habit of fly black and soft underbelly white. I asked you a question. Describe to me what an isosceles triangle looks like. I cried out. My classmates giggled nervously. Sister Margaret frowned. Then she followed my gaze up to where my eyes rested. In the corner of the chalkboard rested a black spider nestling in a spool of gossamer. Sister Margaret and many of the girls in the room screamed, except for Gwen, who stood up and captured the spider. She was fearless. She placed Brother Spider in front of me, stepping gingerly to my desk. She put it on my prayer book. I smiled at him, having heard his story. I admired his cunning, trapping the insects in his masterpiece of a home. Sister Margaret brought her answer book down on the spider. I screamed. 1,000 eyes closed forever. Ame, what are you yelling for?" she asked me. Her face was a mask of disgust as she lifted her sticky book up. "You are a murderer," I cried. Her disgust dropped briefly. Her aura flamed. She loved control. "What do you mean, boy, that I am a murderer? You killed him." Her eyes narrowed. "For killing a small, foul insect, you think I'm a murderer?" "And may go to Father John." "What for?" I didn't know what possessed me. I wasn't usually this forceful. "You're the one that killed the innocent soul who could teach you more about geometry." "May, I will tell you this once. Go to Father John." I left the classroom, accompanied by my classmates' chorus of oohs and ahs. As I went down the hall, I thought to myself, what happened? The new way of seeing things didn't bother me so much. I was more concerned with the how of my new powers of observation. I didn't remember the exact time of my illness. What I remembered When I remembered the day that I became ill, all I could see in my mind was the forest on the north side of the island. Up in the trees, I saw row upon row of moth egg sacs oozing and webbed. I shook that image out of my head as I went to Father John's office with the note that Sister Margaret had given me. He read it. He questioned me about my actions. I confirmed them. He took out a stiff leather strap and asked me to put my hand out across the desk. I complied, knowing what to expect. Crack, crack, crack went the strap across my tender palm, but I didn't feel it. I was entranced by Father John's halo. It glowed dark and murky. It was tarnished, not at all like the gold circles of gold around Jesus and Mary's heads. I began to find that my strange vision was more of a nuisance than a miracle. One day in social studies class, Sister Ernestine was teaching us about the father of our country. I drifted in the class, usually because of her bewitching beauty. She was the youngest of the sisters, and her skin was smooth and brown like a chocolate milkshake, where other sisters were cracked and parched like earth in drought times. She had large, doe-like brown eyes and the most striking lips. The top one was dark and smooth, like her skin, and the lip was flamingo pink. My history book was lying open, and my elbows rested on either side of it. I wasn't really listening to Sister Ernestine. I was following her with my eyes. I noticed the swelling and movements of her form beneath her habit, the way her wimple left an exposed patch of her soft hair, and her aura. It got me in trouble. She called on me while I was dreaming of saving her from some villain. I didn't know what the question had been. I was just thrilled that she had asked me something. I said to her dreamily, "You're glowing like the pink part of a conch shell." Sister Ernestine looked at me blankly. Then she blushed, her ears turning purple. Her aura turned that color too, more or less. The boys in the road behind me snickered. That seemed to set her off. She ran out of the room, tears flowing down her face. The class did not know what to do. We had never seen teachers behave that way. We were used to cruelty. Minutes passed in silence. After a while, someone, I think it was Gwen, made a half-hearted attempt at tomfoolery. Even she, who was usually fearless, was uncertain. It was almost a relief when Father John barged into the room. He stood there for a second, scanning the children's faces before he found the culprit, me. Then he marched over to me and yanked me up. He grabbed my arms, squeezing hard. I wasn't hurt, though I should have been. I was too busy noticing that murky outline of his fingers on my flesh. Then, bang, something hit my head. blanking out my vision. Then I felt pain. A sharp object was wedged against my scalp. It was only when he released me in his office that I could see in that strange way. I turned to regard Father John in his dark clothing. The object hanging against my head had been his crucifix. He had forced me to sit down and called my mother at the gift shop. In about 10 minutes, she arrived, flustered and out of breath. Father John, I came here. Have a seat, please, Rebecca. My mother sat. She still wore her uniform. As she gained her breath, she glared at me. Snow this time, a blizzard. Tell me what this is about. Father John sat at his desk, arranging himself in an actorly way. It seems like your son has taken an active interest in vulgarity. What do you mean? Father John repeated what I had said to Sister Ernestine, changing my words. Mom looked at me on the verge of tears or murder. I said, but child, they both said in unison. Mom finished the sentence. Speak when you're spoken to. I ignored them. But that's not what I said. I said, I like Sister Ernestine. I told her that she glowed pink like a conch shell. Both of them looked at me coldly. Apparently, this was not much better than what they thought I had said. In the end, it was Mom that got me out of serious trouble. She explained to Father John that I had been sick for a long while. Perhaps this was just an after effect of the illness. When I got home, she gave me a spanking and sent me to bed without supper. The vision thing was quite annoying. And let's see, I have a few more pages. Is that okay?
Keep going.
Okay. For weeks afterwards, when I went in public, I wore my mother's rosary beads underneath my shirt. They hid, if only partially, the worst of the visions. I caught glimmers here and there of the outrageous stuff, but the aura sank down into nothingness. For weeks, I was free of plaguing images. I felt safe and normal once more with the cold lead beads against my skin. Every now and then, and in the evenings before Mom came home, I took them off. At once, I was pushed back into a multi-layered reality. I took walks after my homework. In the forest, I could see the birds and insects and flowers. Watching them glow, dart, and radiate was my favorite thing to do in the evenings. Once I saw Undine in her white dress with the blue flowers, silently following Granny on her way to the grocery store. She caught sight of me and I waved. I was hesitant to wave back. Part of me wanted to talk to her, to have her tell me her story, but somehow I knew that in her spirit's fate, she wouldn't speak. What she had to tell me would be told in her graceful balletic movements and through images. All the same, I wasn't too keen on the method of storytelling. What Zora had shown me had scared me. I viewed my sight with ambivalence, and I avoided hilltops and beaches. Sometimes after school, I would wait for Mom in the park bench just opposite the cathedral. I would watch tourists and visitors from the mainland drift by. It was better than kaleidoscopes, watching their auras mingle and blend with one another. One day, I was doing just this when someone sat next to me. I didn't notice anyone until a voice said, "What are you doing, boy?" I turned and I saw this man, nearly 7 feet tall and black as molasses. He wavered. His hands were large, his fingers splaying off his hands like roots. Even the palms of his hands were dark. I looked into his eyes, seeing that they held things, a memory of openness and wideness. I scaled mountains with him and ran the plains. I also knew confinement, chains, and the smell of my neighbors above and below me. I stalked a sea hungry with sharks and floating bodies. I looked away from his eyes. They were worse than what Zora had shown me. I focused on his root hands and his beat purple clothes. How you like seeing things? His voice boomed and gonged in my mind. Not much, I told him. It gets me into trouble. It can do that, certainly, he laughed, a deep, woody chuckle. I could feel plates beneath the earth move. After a while, even watching his spectral fabric became disturbing. I cut to the chase. Who are you? Are you one of my relatives here to show me some awful thing? If you are, I don't want to see it. He laughed again. I felt thunder and waterfalls this time. It was a laughter that was bitter and innocent at once. I am your relative and everyone else's. What do you mean by that? The giant root man stood. His purple and magenta surged and swirled. I have many names. Ask your granny who I am. No, thank you, I said. I was petulant. He was well over 7 feet now. I reached his shin. That is fine for now. We'll have all of forever after you come join we. He threw his huge head back and roared with laughter. Then he dispersed. Ame, mother's shrill voice carried across the park. Who are you talking to? No one, I told her. I walked home sullenly. You were talking aloud, she said. I looked up at her. There was concern in her voice. I got out of my sulking. It was just an imaginary playmate. You sure? Yes, Mom, I'm sure. I didn't tell Granny about the giant. This aspect of my sight, I wanted it to go away. The dead always had such sad stories to tell. However, I knew that this giant was no mere dead thing. He was something more, something even more terrible than a recording of death. Things got worse. One day in music class, the rosary beads warm against my skin, I began to see spirits tramping in and out of the classroom. We were learning Ave Maria, wobbly children's voices just slightly out of tune. I was playing the melody on a glockenspiel. Sister Agnes was leading us with bold, exaggerated strokes of her wand. The dead gathered around her. The angels in robes of blue, their halos gold. Or maybe they wore wreaths made of holly, flowers, and candles on their heads, and sashes made of Christmas tree lights, their wings of aloe leaves. They began to sing with us, eventually drowning us out. Ame, said Sister Agnes, pay attention. I found it impossible to do so. I realized that the rosary beads no longer worked. Instead of hiding the spirit world, they intensified it. I suffered through these visitations in earnest, though. My mother grew more concerned and my grandmother grew more distant. I longed to tell them, no, I wouldn't go mad like Aunt Zora or follow swamp voices like Aunt Undine, but I couldn't give them assurance. I was unsure myself. On Easter Sunday, I was forced into a stifling suit. Mom wore a bright floral print with a wide black hat with a veil. Granny wore a royal blue dress and a hat festering with plastic flowers. We walked down the main street. Granny and Mom complimented the other grown-ups. I just noticed the other kids uncomfortable and squirming. When we got to Divine Annunciation, we forgot our glamour and our discomfort. It was beautifully decorated. Large Easter lilies framed each pew. Candles writhed and flickered on the stage, even though it was daylight. Fresh cut tea roses surrounded the statue of Jesus, and votive candles circled the image of Mary. I was impressed for about 2 minutes. Then I sat down on the hard pew with my legs dangling. Father Anthony began his sermon, droning about this or that or the other. I drifted. At first, I thought there were some children whispering somewhere in the audience. I scanned around for them. Mom popped me on the thigh. Sit still, she hissed. I still heard the whispering. She didn't. I knew it was the spirits. Maybe I can ignore them this time, I thought. But then everything flared. People's auras were like neon signs I saw when I visited the mainland. Everyone's head glowed. Voices became more sibilant and harsher. I put my hands over my ears to drown them out. It was no use. I heard them in my head. Stop that. Mom slapped my thigh again. The white stone beams of the church began to move with vines. Like snakes, jungle vines began to creep up the side of the church. Did no one else see this? Suddenly, the wavering spirits began to crowd into the church, a singing throng of black and red folk festooned with the jewelry of death. They drowned out the priest's droning lecture. The statue of Mary moved, surging with energy. She stood up from her cage of votive candles. She shed her white lady form and changed into something fluid and ancient, dark, flathead canary skirt, topless, her breasts drooping. Jesus did that same thing. He broke away from his cross and his skin turned red. His hair was lusterless black and hanging down his back. He didn't smile. He wore war paint. Both of these figures advanced on me slowly as the church drowned in vines and took on the color of seawater, swamp water. I made to stand up. At either end of the pews, Zora stood Zora and Ondine. I could not escape. I screamed. I remember waking up in Father Anthony's office on his sofa. Both my mother and he were talking. Granny was stroking my forehead. Granny was saying, he has the sight. We have to save him before he goes mad. Mom was shaking and crying. Father Anthony was consoling her. I sat up tentatively. They all looked in my direction. I said, I can't see them anymore. Your sermon cured me. The church saved me. Both Mom and Granny looked at each other. Their faces told a story. Granny, tell me what happened to Ondine, I said. It was summer dusk, muggy, and the cicadas were sizzling outside. Granny put down her knitting. She was silent for a time before she began. She was 17 when she went to the swamp. I tried to stop her many times before. But they're sinking to me, telling me to join them, she told me. I never knew who they were. Granny said nothing more than that. She went back to her knitting. I could have told her who they were, but I didn't think she would really appreciate it. Knowing myself was enough. Every now and then I could hear their drums, their songs of sorrow and joy. I could catch the rustle of their forms. I knew that I would join them eventually, not now. I watched as my grandmother's mist turned pearly blue. That's it.
Thank you for giving us the entire story. If you'd
Oh, you're
stopped at
welcome.
that first point, I don't know if I'd have slept tonight.
Yeah, I never know how long these things last. So thanks everyone for coming.
Yes, thank you so much. And Craig, Alexander, thank you both so much. I feel like I've dreamed a whole night. This was really lovely.
Thank you for having me. This was.
Thanks,
So-
everyone.
I ordered your book, Craig.
Oh,
I
okay.
realized after I ordered it that I didn't order the same book you were reading from, but that's okay. I just want to read something.
Okay, thank you.
The writing is always lovely.
Yeah.
Next week is going to be a special week as well. We have CSE Cooney and Carlos Hernandez. You can keep up to date about upcoming authors at storyhour2020.com and see any programs you may have missed at the Story Hour page on Facebook. So thank you, all of you, for being here. It's been a slightly long story hour, but I think we all can agree that it was worth it. Your stories were gorgeous, both of you. And Daniel, thank you so much for starting Story Hour in the first place so we could all be here around this campfire. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Night.
Good night, everyone.
Night.